Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is our CEO interview storytelling session with Rose Marcario, and this is truly my heart's delight to be able to have this conversation with Rose and to share Rose with you. You know, it's one thing to learn from the conscious business trainers and coaches that are featured in the Inner MBA, and that's terrific. And I love hearing from the CEOs, the people who are right in the fire of doing well and doing good at the same time, and pulling back the curtain and learning from their experience. Rose Marcario is the former CEO of Patagonia, and under Rose's leadership over 12 years, Patagonia was both its most prosperous and its most activist. It had its strongest activist voice in the world. Under Rose's leadership, the business grew from 170 million in sales to well over $1 billion a year in sales. Upworthy named Rose one of the 9 most inspiring CEOs in America. In 2016, Fast Company called her one of the most creative CEOs. Conscious Company magazine called Rose the ultimate mindful leader. And I want to just share something personal about Rose in my own life experience, which is when I first met her, not only was she, and she's continued to be, tremendously generous towards me, but she said something at the end of our first meeting. She looked at me and she said, "You know, Tammy, now's the time to be bold." Bold. And it landed. And this was several years ago. And since then, I think about it a lot, and I've been trying to live into that inspiration. And quite honestly, Rose, it's great to have someone like you as a friend who models it. Thank you. Let's welcome Rose Marcario.
Thank you, Tammy. That's great to hear that story. That gave me chills.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's, by way of introducing you as a person, as a human, not just the former CEO of Patagonia, talk a little bit, if you would, Rose, about your early life, what it was like for you, and how and why you became a business person in the first place.
Well, my early life was kind of a typical middle-class upbringing until, like a lot of people's families, you know, my parents divorced in the 70s, and my mother had absolutely no economic power. She didn't have a job. She didn't have any training. And my father left with no alimony, no child support. She couldn't afford, legal help to help her. And this left a huge impression on me, because having some economic power or control over your own circumstance, it was very meaningful to me, because I'd had this experience of kind of living a middle-class life and then being on, public assistance and welfare and food stamps. And I saw the difficulties my mom went through. And so it's funny, you go through these traumas and they affect you your whole life. And for me, if I could master business and understand how to make money in the world, that felt like what was driving me in my really early years. And business seemed like, well, at least it was a way to make money. My friends that were artists and stuff like that seemed like they were struggling. So, that's how I ended up going into business and finance.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think innately made you have a gift for business?
Well, I've always been a very curious person, and I like to, question why things are done and how they're done. I came from a very immigrant Italian family, and the idea was you had a really strong work ethic, and you went into work and you did your job better than anyone else, and you kind of kept your head down. And so I had those kinds of things. And also I tried to find who the good leaders were, and then in the company, even if they weren't my boss, and get to know them. And most of the time that ended up kind of helping advance my career. And if I was in a situation with a bad leader or reporting to a bad leader, I would just sort of take the attitude that, well, I have a lot to learn from this person of how not to be a leader. And I think, you know, Tammy, this is retrospective, right? Because I'm 57 now. But, you know, I also didn't choose to have children. And I think a lot of women are really, they come out of their careers in the middle of their life because they have this really difficult decision to make, you know, to take care of their kids. And so I didn't choose to have children. And I think in some ways that, you know, that allowed me to develop in ways that maybe other women wouldn't have had the chance to do that. And it's why having on-site childcare was so important to me at Patagonia.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm hearing everything you're saying, and I'm with you on the work ethic, and I'm with you on looking for good models. The fact that you decided to learn from bad models instead of just like get me away from those people, that's pretty amazing. Yeah. And I'm with you in terms of not having children, and so you had the ability to focus on your work. But I also think, Rose, just to dig in a little bit, there's something about the way you look at problems, the way you analyze things, the way you investigate and dig and think that has also been part of your success. And I wonder what you might have to say about that upon reflection.
Well, I think that yes, I have always been kind of like an inquirer and a researcher, you know, sort of person. I like to find the root causes of things. And I do think that it's a really helpful tool in business, you know, because sometimes what you're seeing in front of you might seem so obvious, but then you start digging and you start talking to people and you start, you know, like figuring things out, and the answer might be a totally different answer.
Okay, I feel satisfied now. All right, now your early interest in Buddhism, how did that come about?
You know, it just happened. I was in my early 20s and I was lamenting with my partner at the time, who had, by the way, a bookshelf of spiritual teachers on her bookshelf. And that I felt, you know, really disconnected from Catholicism, which was a religion I was raised in. And she gave me like a book of a talk that Krishnamurti had done. And I read it and it just like blew my mind, because he was talking about all these things that seemed to me really important about life. And I was like, wow, I want to dig into this more. And, you know, and then I started listening, you know, I got, you know, tapes and stuff from Sounds True, Tammy.
Okay. I believe you.
I went to these places where I could listen to these spiritual teachers, and I just felt like this, like, wow, I was onto something. And I wanted to, you know, dig in more. And I went to those places where I could dig in more. And I started reading Jack Kornfield, and I started reading, you know, listening to tapes of Ram Dass, and, you know, just different teachers, you know.
Okay. Now, earlier today in our conversation, we heard from some of the conscious business trainers who said, you know, yes, I was clergy over here and I was in business over there, and these two things were separate. And it wasn't until much later in my life that I found a way to bring them together. How did that work for you?
Well, I think, you know, I got through the survival mode. I got past survival mode. I was an executive now in Silicon Valley and doing very well. And when you're past survival mode, you can think about some of these bigger issues. And I really looked at the choices that I had made. I looked at what business was doing, and I was struggling with it. You know, do I want to be a part of something that I feel is inherently kind of bad for people and the planet? Does it have to be that way? What are the other options and alternatives? And I think that was sort of the way I came to it. I mean, I realized that, like, I have to make a change, or it was like watching a train wreck, you know? Like, I see the train coming, I see this train wreck happening in which I become this person that I don't want to be. And if I don't change things now, then I'll never change them. I mean, that's what it felt like to me. So I made a very dramatic move, and I left my very well-paying, you know, gig and corporate America, and I took a break and kind of got my head together.
Okay. For the person who's listening, who's in that place where they say, you know, I've been living a trade-off. Like I have this view that you have to trade off. In order to
Yeah.
earn the kind of money I need, I have to do this thing. And what would you say to that?
Well, at that time in my career, it didn't feel like there were a lot of places to go to look for responsible companies. I mean, they were primarily, private companies like yours or Patagonia, and you had to kind of seek them out. But now I feel like there's more community. You know, there's the benefit corporation movement. There's a whole host of companies now that take corporate purpose very seriously and want to do more for people and the planet. And so I think there's more resources now. There's more companies now. I see a lot of. I'm running I'm partner in a venture fund right now, and I see so many great companies that are trying to solve the issues that we have with climate and the social issues that we have. And so I don't know. I feel like there's a little bit more of a roadmap, but you know, it's a journey. It takes time. It's very risky. It feels very risky to leave a comfortable job.
Mm-hmm. Can you share more of that juncture in your life? What was happening for you? How did you have the courage to leave? How did you sort your way through that transition period?
Well, it was strange because I was getting more and more. I was meditating more. I was getting more involved with the meditation practice and with my own sort of inner dialogue about why was I here and what was I doing. And so it was strange. I mean, it was like there was actually one really strange moment. You know, I was in a limo doing a road show, you know, getting driven around New York, which in and of itself is kind of insane because, you know, you're only blocks away from most of the places that you have to be. And there was this homeless person crossing the street who was obviously mentally ill and holding up my limo because they were kind of stopped and wavering in front of the limo. And I was getting kind of annoyed by it, you know, because it was like, oh, this person's holding me up. And I saw my reflection in the side of the limo, and I was like, I got scared. Like, is this the person I'm going to become? The person who's annoyed at a person who has mental illness because I'm on my way to a meeting. And I felt like everything in my life was going in that direction unless I made a change. And so I went down to Central Park. I got out of the car I was in. I walked to Central Park and I was sitting on a park bench. And I thought, you know, I have to make a big decision here. Like, do I continue doing the thing that's safe and that anchored me because, you know, I was always afraid of being poor without a job. And do I make a big transformation? And I decided I would make a big transformation. I would leave, even though I didn't know, you know, I didn't know if I had, you know, my parachute. I didn't know if there was ground underneath me, you know. It was sort of a culminating moment like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, from the practice of meditation, you credit meditation with helping you cultivate an inner sense of confidence, inner joy, inner equanimity, and peace and kindness. That's a lot. Tell us more about how meditation has helped you cultivate these qualities.
Well, in like Tibetan meditation, you're practicing those qualities all the time. You know, you're practicing loving kindness, you're practicing equanimity and joy, and you're bringing, you know, you start with yourself and then the people that you love and that you're close to, and then you kind of bring it out to the neutral people and then to the people that you might not know or might not like. I mean, the people you don't like, that's a tough one, right? And so you practice it. And I just think like anything else, you know, you have to practice something to get good at it, you know, and to cultivate those, it's not just about like an intellectual exercise. You actually have to generate those feelings. And when you generate those feelings, you know, they become more a part of you. And so, you know, there's not like one moment I can point to or anything, but I can say that the practice is a very helpful practice if you want to, you know, if you starting from a base of nothing, it can help build up that base for you.
I want to ask you specifically about inner confidence, because one of the things I saw, having gone through now the Inner MBA for 1 year, was that a lot of people in the Inner MBA said, you know, this all sounds great, but I'm held back by these doubts or these fears or these ways that I don't feel worthy, on and on. And I was like, oh my God, the Inner MBA is almost like a confidence incubator for people. What do you have to say about that, Rose? As somebody who does, in my view, you do all kinds of like big, strong things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that it has to come from love, right? I mean, the things that you do, for me anyway, it has to come from the love of a community, the love of the planet, the love of the people that you are, that you surround yourself with, the love for people that you don't even know. So it kind of has to come from that. And, you know, in the Buddhist text, you know, the Buddha kind of says like you can extinguish fear with inquiry. And I think that's kind of interesting, because when you really think about like what holds you back from having a tough conversation, or what holds you back from doing something really bold in your business, you know, it's always that your inquiry kind of stops. It stops at, you know, someone will think badly of me, or this won't go well, or, you know, some projection of the future, some negative projection of the future, because you have some belief about what an outcome is going to be. And I just think that when you really look deeply into why you're doing certain things, and why you're choosing to take certain actions, if you stay present with it and you believe in it, then it happens in a natural way. And the consequences, well, you've already thought through the consequences. The consequences aren't really that meaningful in the big scheme of things if it's something that you really believe in, you know?
I think this would be a great place, Rose, for you to give me an example from your own life of something hard that you had to do that required a lot of strength and confidence, and how you used inquiry to get through it.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a really recent example of when I left Patagonia. I was, without question, probably at the pinnacle of my career. And I was questioning, what would I do in the next 10 years? Would I stay at Patagonia and kind of continue to ride the wave of what I had created? And at that point, the question for myself was like, well, I could do that, but that feels easy. You know, that feels like a path I know will, you know, kind of have a certain consequence. And, you know, I felt comfortable being the CEO at that point. I'd been CEO for 7 years. But then I looked at the world and I thought, well, is it the best use of my skill set to spend the next 10 years doing exactly what I'm doing? And is that what the world needs right now? And then that was a line of questioning. And then would it make, what would make me feel like I was contributing as much as I could contribute? And I had to go down that line of questioning. And at the end of the day, I felt like what I needed to be focusing on was not running a retail company anymore, even though it's a wonderful retail company. But there's big transitions that need to happen in business in the next 10 years, or we won't have a planet to live on. We won't have a livable future. So what's the best way for me to spend my time? That was a really hard inquiry to go through, right? Because I was really comfortable and proved myself and all of that. And he was walking away from a certain amount of security. But I don't know, I felt compelled to do it. And if I didn't do it, I wouldn't have been able to really sit with myself and feel that I had lived up to my full potential.